The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The South Kesteven series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Hello folks, welcome back to South Kesteven. We're beginning another run of 5 this week on the other side of the summer break. And effectively what we're doing here is we're carrying on where we left off. We've got a watercourse here under our feet. This is a bridge which crosses said watercourse. It's not the greatest of streams or rivers ever. Now, at some point in this place's past, there probably would have been a ford here, because the name of this place kind of gives it away. It's called Greatford. Greatford, gravelly ford. This week we're back in South Kesteven again. That finishing line here is drawing ever closer. Today I have a place called Greatford for you to enjoy. It's a village in the countryside between Stamford, Bourne and Market Deeping, which has the River West Glen for company. The name Greatford comes from Old English words meaning gravelly ford, linked to the stony crossing of the West Glen that once made this a useful route. Medieval spellings such as Greitford and Gretford suggest that link with grit and water rather than size or status. Settlement here began in the Anglo-Saxon period, with Greatford recorded in the Domesday Book as a manor. It included the now lost hamlet of Manthorpe to the west. Through enclosure and Victorian farming, it has continually stayed a small agricultural parish. Its best feature is Greatford Hall. That's a rebuilt Elizabethan house hidden behind trees near the river. Once a private asylum, it's best known as the home of the physician Francis Willis, who treated King George III here in the 1780s. Other landmarks give Greatford its outline. They include the Grade 1 listed church of St Thomas of Becket with its tall spire, the playing field and the play area, and the neat stone cottages lining Main Street beside the West Glen. For centuries, farming has been the main source of work here, with crops like barley noted here as early as the 13th century. Estate employment at Greatford Hall added to that, whilst in the 20th century, Tallington's Down-Mac concrete works offered some jobs too. Aside from Francis Willis, Greatford's other famous resident was Harry Dowsett, the civil engineer and founder of Down-Mac, who also lived at the hall for a time. He supported the church, and as such his grave can be found close to its porch. Water is a popular topic here. In recent years, flooding has been a serious concern, with repeated events linked to storms such as Babbitt and Henk, leading to formal investigations and a very active flood action group. Stories of high river levels on the West Glen are passed on with a mixture of respect and dry humour. It's not all fun and games though. Insurance costs and future defences are regular items for parish meetings in this place. So in all, this is a place that derives its name from a gravel ford on the West Glen. It has a hidden hall with a royal medical history, a fine spired church, working farmland and flood stories. All of it sits within a very compact, very walkable Lincolnshire landscape. Let's go.
Hiya folks, here's what I have for you in Greatford. I won't be especially busy today, but I still have to put the hall and the church on the map, and I also get to tell you all about the Waterside Garden Centre on the A15.
Okay, so here we are then at our sort of start point, although it's not really our start point because I'm actually going to be moving the car again in a moment. I just wanted to show you this watercourse again, you know, where we were in the intro. I don't know what the name of this stream or river is. It doesn't look very deep, whatever it is, but I wonder if this was the place where the ford was in Greatford. Obviously not a ford anymore because this bridge is here instead now. Now, a few hundred yards up the road from this bridge in this sort of direction, on the left hand side is Greatford Hall, and that is our actual start point. And actually, Amelia's going to tell you a bit about it.
There's perhaps no better place to begin here than Greatford Hall. This is a fine country residence, which sits on the site of an older manor house. It was first built in around 1610, and that early house stood for a long time before a fire destroyed it in 1922. The site didn't stay empty for long. This new house replaced it, but the grounds survived. They were shaped in the early 17th century, then again in the 18th century, and once more in the early 20th century. One unusual feature added to them in the 1930s was a set of commercial watercress beds. They were part of the working land linked to the hall and formed a small business on the site. Records show that the original hall was large and important. Indeed, Greatford Hall was important enough to have links to a well-known doctor called Francis Willis. He owned the hall in the late 16th century and early 17th century. Willis became famous for treating King George III here during his period of mental illness. In effect then, this was a private asylum. Harry Dowsett, the man who founded the Dowmac Concrete Works at Tollington, also lived here much later on. Dowsett was a key benefactor to Greatford and supported the church. We'll see that in a moment.
Okay, so just a few steps up the road from Greatford Hall, there's a little bridge which crosses a watercourse here. This looks quite nice, look at this. And then on the other side of this, there's a church. And this one here is dedicated to St. Thomas of Canterbury.
St. Thomas à Becket's church is listed Grade 1. It dates back to the 11th century, with later work added in the 13th, 14th and 17th centuries. It's built from limestone mainly, and its roof is made from Collyweston slate. The building was restored in around 1854. The outside of the church has several features that help date each part. The north wall includes herringbone stonework, which points to its very early construction. It also has a blocked round-headed window from the 11th century and a blocked 13th century doorway. The west wall holds a single 13th century lancet window. The north chapel has a large 14th century window with reticulated tracery, which was a type of stone pattern used in that period. One of the most eye-catching parts of the church is the late 13th century tower, built in 3 stages. It has clasping buttresses and a brooch spire. The belfry stage includes paired lancets with carved circles above them. The porch, added in the early 14th century, has set-back buttresses and a double chamfered outer arch. It includes triple-shafted reveals, foliate capitals, and carved human headstops. Harry Dowsett's grave is just outside the porch in the churchyard.
Okay, so now there is a path that runs through this churchyard and it will take you onto the road that leads north from Greatford, but it doesn't really help us because our next landmark is back on the main road over there. The only thing that's really up that side street is the village hall, which you can get to quite easily from the main road through Greatford. There's no point really going round in a loop. It makes more sense if you look at the map. So we're going to head back down the drive again, down the road we've just come down, back over that nice little bridge again, take a left turn, and the next thing on our list is the Greatford Cross. At the centre of Greatford is a point where some old routes once met each other. The area around it holds traces of medieval life recorded through earthworks and finds. These traces include building platforms, tofts, crofts and hollowways. The area includes this, Greatford Cross. It dates from the 16th century and is very close to the moat that once surrounded Greatford Hall. We don't know a lot about this cross, but the assumption is that it was potentially an ancient waymarker of some kind. Archaeologists have also found small pieces of pottery near the site. These include shards from the 13th and 14th centuries, such as Stannion, Lyveden beeware. That confirms that people lived and worked around the site of the cross during the medieval period. Greatford's only pub is the Hare and Hounds, but as of right now it's closed. Close to the centre of the village, it traded as a country pub for a long time and was known for serving both real ale and food. This isn't the first time it's been closed. It shut in 2011, but it didn't stay so for long. It reopened later that same year after a full refurbishment and repairs, bringing it back to life again. It continued to trade for several more years after that work. However, in January of this year, it was closed again and was boarded up. With that act, the pub ended its long period of service in the village again, leaving behind reviews, records and memories from its years of trade. Greatford Village Hall is the main meeting place for the parish. The building is easy to find as it sits close to both the church and the main road through the village. It's a simple single-storey building made for practical use rather than decoration. It has enough space for tables, chairs and a healthy public attendance. Although there is no published history about when the hall was built, we know this has served the village for several decades. It continues to play an important role in village life today. The old school in Greatford is a Grade 2 listed building. It's actually both a former school and a schoolhouse built in 1761. It's made of squared limestone rubble which gives it a solid traditional look typical of South Kesteven. The roof is made of slate. The old school is linked with Crane Cottage which forms part of the same listed entry. Both buildings share the same construction materials. Together they make up the full site recorded by Historic England. The old school was part of education in the village for a long time. White's Trade Directory from 1872 states that as a national school it had around 30 pupils attending. It was certainly an active and an important part of village life. Okay, so from this point onwards at the parish notice board, it's pretty much all residential. I'm not going to walk any further, I'm just going to walk back at this point. We'll drive out and cover the rest of Greatford in a moment. I'm going to leave a card on the board like I always do. That can go up there, and that's Greatford in the books. Okay, nice village, would you agree? There's one more thing to cover within the parish boundaries though. We've dealt with the village itself. There's a garden centre which is just within Greatford, and for that we need to head to the north.
On the way out of Greatford towards our next village, we have to pass Waterside Garden Centre. The story of this place goes back to 1988. Two men called Andy Parrott and Alan Walters were neighbours who shared a love for gardening and growing vegetables. They decided to turn their passion into a full-time business. The result was Waterside Nursery, which started initially on what was an old watercress bed on the A15 near Kate's Bridge. Within a few years, the present site became available and they relocated. After many months of hard work, Waterside Garden Centre officially opened on St Patrick's Day, the 17th of March 1990. Over the following years, the centre continued to evolve with extensions to the two original garden centre buildings going ahead in 1992. Now, the place has a massive conservatory frontage. In 2010, Waterside installed a Rovero roll-air greenhouse over the outdoor plant area, enabling them to improve customer comfort via a fully opening and closing roof that could offer an all-weather shopping experience. In 2016, Waterside purchased a second garden centre called the Olive Grove Nursery at Polebrook in Oundle, Northamptonshire. That one specialises in olive trees and Mediterranean plants, with the largest selection of olive trees in the UK.
And so that's Greatford, a village that goes back to the Anglo-Saxon period and appears in the Domesday Book along with the now lost hamlet of Manthorpe. The standout building is, for sure, Greatford Hall, first built in around 1610 and rebuilt after a fire in 1922. It's best known as the home of Dr. Francis Willis, the physician who treated King George III during his illness in the 1780s. The village church, Sir Thomas a Becket, is another highlight, as are Greatford Cross, the old pub, the village hall and the old school. Water plays a big part in village life. The West Glen can rise fast, and recent storms like Babbitt and Henk have caused real problems here. And of course, just down the road is Waterside Garden Centre, which has grown into the large site it occupies today. It's a nice village, just don't get your feet wet.
A village that sits by the West Glen's flow, stone paths cut where the old tracks go. Manthorpe's name drifts through fields once farmed, lines of a place long lost unharmed. Dowmack's mark lives in talk round here, built on skill that locals hold dear. Greatford has a bold, bright tone, river and stone in a place well known. Greatford with its own shore aim, past and present in one clear frame. George came seeking a calmer mind, Willis worked with a craft refined. The huge tall hall stands behind its trees, holding tales shaped by time and breeze. cottages sit by the water's bend, marking the line where the fields extend. Greatford has a bold, bright tone, river and stone in a place well known. Greatford with its own sure aim, past and present in one clear frame. Manthorpe's trace rests in soil and name, Dalmac's work built a lasting claim. Willis and George left a mark still clear, threads of a place that many hold near. Greatford has a bold, bright tone, river and stone in a place well known. Greatford with its own sure aim, past and present in one clear frame. Greatford has a bold, bright tone, river and stone in a place well known. Greatford with its own sure aim, past and present in one clear frame.
Hello folks, welcome back to South Kesteven once again. Now, in recent episodes out here in South Kesteven, we've learned that this area is absolutely littered with old gravel pits and workings that have now been turned into something else. And this place has perhaps the biggest amount, shall we say, for want of a better term, of those things. I'm talking, of course, about Baston Lakes, which you can find in the parish of Baston. Baston, Back's farmstead. Today in South Kesteven, we're in Baston on the western edge of the fens between Bourne and Market Deeping on the A15. This is a linear village that stretches from King Street to Baston Fen and the River Glen, with a collection of arable fields, gravel pits and lakes. The name began as Baftune or Back's Tun, probably meaning the rise with a yard or a farmstead. It's ancient too. It was first recorded in around 650 AD and was on the Guthlac roll by 871. It settled into Baston in diocesan records by about 1200. People have farmed here since Neolithic times, with Iron Age and Roman activity along Cardyke and King Street. By Doomsday, Baston had 29 households, ploughlands, meadow, a church and a mill under Crowland Abbey and Ivo of Dryby. No one feature sums up modern Baston, instead several do. I'm referring mainly to the belt of gravel pits and lakes east of the village. They were long quarried for aggregate, and many pits are now flooded, attracting anglers, birdwatchers and water sports. In the village itself, St John the Baptist Church, with its 14th century arcades and yellow-washed nave, the 16th century Baston Manor House with its dovecote, and the site of Hudson's Tower Mill give the village a strong historic outline. Today, arable farming still matters, but gravel extraction and related quarry firms, along with local services, schools and leisure businesses linked to the lakes, provide much of the employment base. And Baston's story is best told through its residents. A few notable people have lived here. 19th century figures like Robert Marriott, who was a horse breeder at the manor house, and a later farmer called Francis Knipe, who kept large herds of cattle and sheep, stand out in local records. There is a tantalising link to a national legend here too. Some writers place King Arthur's first battle at the mouth of the River Glen, halting Anglo-Saxon advance in the process. The exact site is debated, but the Glen is believed to be the Glen. Current talk in Baston centres on more quarrying. Proposals for further Cemex gravel extraction at Thetford Farm and large housing schemes off the A15 have raised concerns about traffic, flooding risk and services. It's always a contentious issue. We'll carry all of that with us today as we visit a village with ancient fields and Roman roads, a church and a manor house, gravel pits alive with birds, working farms, and a whisper of Arthur by the glen. Baston feels ready to be explored.
Hi everyone. In Baston today I have a few bits to cover, like the church and a chapel that's now a garage. I'll also be telling you about the Car Dyke, plus I'll be trying to figure out if King Arthur went into battle here.
We begin proceedings today just to the north of Baston, close to the flat washlands by the River Glen. This is the hamlet of Thetford, tiny with just a handful of homes and farm buildings. It feels more like a cluster of houses than a full village. The land around it is mostly fields, and Thetford Farm is the main landmark people use when talking about the place. The area has long been used for farming, and the fields stretch right up towards the A15, which runs past the hamlet. A big talking point in recent years here has been Cemex and their plans for sand and gravel extraction at Thetford Farm. The company has been working through proposals with Lincolnshire County Council, including changes made after earlier consultations. The planning process has been long and sometimes tense. Baston Parish Council and local councillors spoke out against the quarry plan at meetings, including a final decision session this March, where the application was approved. The quarry is expected to run for around 10 years, with HGVs entering and leaving via a new access road on the A15, just north of Baston and close to Thetford Farm's entrance. The quarry is intended to replace Cemex's older site at King Street in West Deeping, which is running out of material. So for a tiny hamlet, Thetford has found itself at the centre of a big local issue. The fields around it will look very different once the quarry starts operating. Whether someone is for or against the plans, it's fair to say Thetford has become a name people now recognise. But Baston is no stranger to quarrying anyway. If you head east out of the village, you soon reach a long chain of old and new gravel pits that sit between it and Langtoft. These pits didn't appear overnight. Quarrying has been going on here for years. The process has been helped by river gravels that sit on top of the Oxford clay beneath the fields. The whole area was packed with a type of gravel known as first terrace. When archaeologists dug ahead of the new quarry phases, they found all sorts of clues about earlier life here. At Baston Quarry No. 2, for example, teams uncovered traces of prehistoric activity, including Bronze Age pits and wells, plus Romano-British field systems and later medieval farming features. These digs were carried out before each new stage of gravel extraction. Some quarrying has finished here now, but the pits didn't stay empty. Over time, the old workings filled with water and became a patchwork of lakes. Today, these are known as the Baston and Langtoft gravel pits, and they're well known for birdwatching. Even though most pits are private, you can still see plenty from the roads. What started as digging for building material has ended up creating one of the area's best known wildlife spots, all sitting just east of the main village. Okay, so just before we go into Baston, there's something else I want to talk about while we're here in Thetford, and that would be the Car Dyke. We're familiar with the Car Dyke, aren't we, from a couple of Peterborough episodes we saw last year. Well, here it's not totally obvious where the Car Dyke runs, because as you can see here, it's just basically a big field. But trust me, the line of the Car Dyke passes through Thetford, and it also passes through Baston as well.
Back in Thetford, we have something else to discuss. If you stand here, you're directly on the line of one of the biggest Roman earthworks in the whole region, Carr Dyke. It runs along the western edge of the fens and stretches for about 57 miles from Lincoln to the River Nene at Peterborough. The section near Baston is part of the Northern Run, which was built across ground, where the land sits around the 10-foot contour. The Romans cut it straight through the fen edge, and the bit near Thetford follows the same long route that passes places like Thurlby and Bourne. Carr Dyke is thought to have been built, possibly, in around 125 AD, and it was definitely artificial. Excavations along the Lincolnshire stretch have shown that the channel was roughly 15 metres wide at the top and between 2 and 4 metres deep, with sloping sides and a flat base. Near Baston, a dig in the 1980s found that the channel here had a navigable width of about 40 feet and a depth of 6.5 feet. So even though it looks like a ditch today, it was once a serious piece of engineering. People have argued for years about what Carr Dyke was actually for. Some early writers thought it was a Roman canal for moving goods, but its main purpose may have been drainage, helping to control floodwater along the fen edge, with only some stretches used for transport. There's no firm agreement, but everyone accepts it was a major Roman project.
Jesus, I've got a bit of a sore throat today. I don't know whether you've noticed that in the Greatford episode yesterday and sort of the beginning of this, I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, so I won't be on camera very much. Thankfully, I don't need to do much while I'm actually on camera in this one, so that's a bit of a bonus. We've made it to Baston now, and this is a reasonable sized village, to be honest with you. There's plenty enough to cover. We're going to start by heading down the main street towards the school. In the village now, we begin at Baston C of E Primary School on Main Street. It takes children aged 4 to 11 and is a Church of England voluntary controlled school with space for around 210 pupils. It's been inspected by Ofsted several times over the last few years. The most recent inspection was in November 2024, and that judged the school to be good. The school building itself has an interesting past. A fire in the early 1990s meant an old building had to be replaced, and a new one with 4 classrooms opened in 1993. As numbers grew, a 5th classroom was added in 1998, set up as a temporary unit close to the main building. All in all, Baston School has a long track record, a modern building shaped by events in the 1990s, and a steady run of positive inspection results. Good school. Baston has 2 pubs and they both reference horses. Here's the Black Horse, which has been part of the village since at least the 1800s. It's easy to spot, right in the centre of the village, and it's long been known as a place where people could eat, drink and stay the night. Today, the Black Horse is a pub, a restaurant, a hotel and even a wedding venue, and its website describes it as a restored building with a mix of old features and modern touches. Inside, there's a bar serving cask ales and wine, plus a restaurant offering meals made with local ingredients. The upstairs rooms are set up as boutique accommodation, each one decorated differently, with ensuite bathrooms and breakfast included. Licensed for civil ceremonies, the Carr Dyke Suite can host weddings and private events. It can hold between 10 and 120 guests. If you head down Thetford Avenue, you'll reach Baston Cemetery, the main burial ground for the village. It has 332 recorded memorials, all of which have been photographed and logged on the popular website Find a Grave. It's a neat, open site, easy to reach, and clearly well kept. The cemetery was opened at some point after 1900. Before this, burials took place in the churchyard at St John the Baptist's, but that church was officially closed for new burials in February 1909, except for special cases. Once that happened, Baston Cemetery became the main place. Even though Baston Cemetery isn't huge, it plays a big part in the village's past. It holds over a century of local names. It's a small place, surprisingly well documented, and it gives us a solid factual idea of how Baston grew through the 20th century. It's a good day for the fans because also on Thetford Avenue are the allotments tucked away behind some houses. These allotments have been in place for years and the parish council keeps them going by renting out plots to people in the village. Okay, we're back on the main street here. We're just passing the church, which is on our left-hand side, but we'll see this properly later because that'll be better done from the street that runs around the back of it. We're staying where we are. Next, it's Chapel Motors.
If you head along Main Street in Baston, you'll spot Chapel Motor Repairs sitting in a building that doesn't look like your usual garage. That's because it isn't one. The workshop is inside what used to be a primitive Methodist chapel, first opened in 1861. The chapel stood right in the centre of the village, serving a small congregation for decades before closing in the 20th century. The building stayed put though, and that's how it ended up with its second life as a motor repair shop. Baston had two Methodist chapels. As well as this, there was a Wesleyan one elsewhere in the village. As Chapel Motor Repairs, this one is now a local garage offering repairs, servicing, and MOT preparation. It's one of those places where, once you know the history, you can't unsee it. If you look at the building today, you can still see its old chapel layout. The front gable, the tall roof line, and the simple rectangular footprint all match the style of small rural chapels built in the mid-1800s. It certainly isn't just a handy place to get your car sorted. Lots of old chapels in Lincolnshire were turned into houses, workshops, or stores. But Baston's is one of the few that kept its history alive in such a direct way. The building has gone from hymns to head gaskets, but it still has a good use.
So I said at the top that Baston is a decent sized village and it's big enough to have its own shop. It's just here. Also on Main Street, you'll spot the village post office and shop at number 16, right in the middle of things. This is officially a post office, a bank service, a courier point and a general shop, all rolled into one. It has the usual bits you'd expect from a village shop with a post office counter. Although there isn't a big written history of the Baston shop anywhere online, this stretch has always been the centre of village life, with shops and services dotted along it for over a century. The modern post office sits on the same historic run of buildings. Now we've reached the Broodnell playing fields, which is the main recreation ground for the village. The fields sit right next to Baston Village Hall, and the whole site is managed together. The grounds are open 24 hours a day. It's a big open space used for sport and general outdoor time. The fields are run by the Broodnell Playing Fields Management Committee, which has looked after the site since 1966. The committee was set up specifically to manage both the playing fields and the village hall after the land and buildings were bought in trust by the village for recreation and leisure. These fields almost certainly take their name from an old aristocratic family based at Dean in Northamptonshire. They are the same family that produced the Earls of Cardigan, including the famous James Thomas Broodnell, who led the charge of the Light Brigade. Baston Village Hall is better known as the Barn. It's the main indoor venue for the village and has been run in a very particular way for decades. The barn is used for all sorts, including things like the village fete, toddler groups and WI meetings. Outdoor events often spill into the hall, and indoor events can use the fields when the weather is good. With its central spot, long history and steady use by local groups, it continues to be one of the key places where things happen in Baston. Opposite the fields, there's another school. This is Kirkston House, which is an independent day school that teaches boys and girls from age 4 right up to 18, so it covers everything from early years to 6th form. It's been part of village life for over 60 years. The school began in January 1964 when Mrs. Beryl K. Wyman opened it as a tiny nursery with just 4 pupils. That's the bit that surprises most people. The whole place started with a handful of children in one small setting. As demand grew, the school added more year groups, eventually teaching pupils up to GCSE level. The 6th form arrived in 2013, using the existing buildings to offer the BTEC Extended Diploma. It sees itself as a music school, as you can see from its gateway. Time for the other pub now. This is the White Horse on Church Street. It appears on 19th century Ordnance Survey maps marked clearly as the White Horse Inn, which tells us it's been around since at least the mid-1800s. The pub appears in several historic trade directories, including Kelly's and White's, usually listed under inns and taverns. It was a proper coaching-style pub rather than a small beer house. The name White Horse, by the way, was a very popular pub name in Lincolnshire. In more recent times, the White Horse has traded as a pub and a restaurant. Even though the inside has been updated over the years, the outside still looks like the sort of place you'd expect to see on an old village postcard. Don't know whether you heard there in the last shot, you could hear the organ. We're just inside the church's porch. There's someone in there playing the organ. So even though the church is open, I'm not actually going to go inside and have a look because I don't want to disturb them. So we'll shut the door again and we'll just have a look at Baston's church from the outside. Amelia, what can you tell us about this lovely building?
Church Street is also where you'll find St John's Church, sitting on the northern side of the road with its tall tower looking over the village. It's officially listed as the Church of St John the Baptist, and it's one of the most important historic buildings in the whole area. It was first listed in 1968, with an amendment in 1987. It's a Grade 1 building, and it's been here a very long time. The Domesday Book mentions a church at Baston belonging to Crowland Abbey, so there was already a place of worship here in 1086. The earliest surviving part of the current building is its early English chancel arch, dating from the 1200s. Most of the rest of the church is later, built in the Perpendicular period, which gives it the tall windows and straight lines you can still see today. The building is made from coursed limestone rubble and ashlar, with a mix of lead and Collyweston slate on the roofs. The west tower is a standout feature. It's a 3-stage 15th century structure with buttresses, string courses, an embattled top, and a set of tiered belfry openings. The south aisle has a lovely fleuron frieze running along the parapet. It also has a pair of carved blank panels with tri-lobed heads. They are thought to be linked to work done in around 1403, when a chapel dedicated to St Mary was added.
Okay, and so from this point here, it's just a simple case of making our way back to the car. I parked on Manor Drive, which is at the very far end of Baston, sort of western end, just before you hit the area where Baston Lakes is. So we're going to make our way between here and there, and that is our journey around the village. But of course there is one thing we haven't yet spoken about, and that is the supposed link between Baston and King Arthur. Did he really go into battle out here? Let's find out.
Finally, let's end with a legend. If you stand by the River Glen near Baston and look along the flat fen edge, it's easy to see why people get excited about an old Arthurian link. The earliest written source for Arthur's battles is the Historia Brittonum, written in around 828 AD. That document, often linked to the monk Nennius, lists 12 battles. The very first one is said to have taken place at the mouth of the River Glane. Because the spelling is so close to Glen, writers from the 1800s onward have suggested that this could mean the River Glen in Lincolnshire. It's not proven, but it's one of those ideas that refuses to go away. The River Glen runs right past Baston before joining the Welland. It's a small river today, but in the early medieval period it would have been broader and marshier, sitting on the edge of the fens. That kind of ground fits the sort of place where a defensive stand could happen. Victorian antiquarians loved this idea, and several of them wrote that the Glane must be the Glen because it's within a region where early British groups and incoming Anglo-Saxons would have met. Modern historians are more cautious. Some argue that the Glane might be in Northumberland, where there is a Glen River near Yeavering. Others point out that Nennius's geography is messy, and the list of battles may mix real events with legend. But the Lincolnshire theory keeps turning up in books, local histories, and archaeological discussions. It is the sort of place where a clash could have happened, even if we can't prove Arthur was involved. What makes the Baston area interesting is how much early activity has been found nearby. None of it proves an Arthurian battle, of course, but it does show that the land around the Glen was busy long before and long after the time Arthur is supposed to have lived. Whether Arthur was here or not, it's fun to imagine the clash of shields somewhere along the banks of the Glen. We know the fen edge was a frontier zone, but we can't prove there was ever a battle.
As we roll out of Baston, you really get a sense of how much is packed into this long village on the edge of the fens. You've got ancient fields, the Roman earthworks of Cardyke, and that long stretch from King Street to Baston Fen, all sitting between gravel pits, lakes, and the River Glen. It's hard not to think about how quarrying has affected this village. Old pits are filled with water and turned into spots for anglers and birdwatchers, while new extraction plans at Thetford Farm keep the debate going. And then there are the people and the day-to-day places that make Baston feel lived in. You have the primary school, rebuilt in 1993, the 2 horse-name pubs, the allotments, the cemetery, and even the old primitive Methodist chapel now working away as chapel motor repairs. And let's not forget the Arthurian whisper about a battle by the River Glen. Today's ending song is all about that legend. It may not be a provable fact that he went into battle near the river, but we all love a bit of folklore, don't we? Was the Glane actually the Glen? Well, who knows?
Hard on the banks of the Glane. War cries cut sharp through the pounding rain. Arthur strikes fierce with a brutal roar. Saxon shields crack as he drives at the core. Clash after clash after clash after clash, as the ground starts to quake. Roar of the Glade as the warriors collide. Arthur storms forward with power and pride. Blades bite hard in the mud and the spray. No foe stands firm in the crush of the fray. Hard, hard, hard. Spears punch the air as the battle turns red. Saxons fall back while their captains plead dread. Arthur strikes fast. Arthur strikes fast with the thunderous cry, driving them hard as their courage runs dry. Clash after clash after clash after clash, as the ground starts to quake. Roar of the Glade as the warriors collide. Arthur storms forward with power and pride. Blades bite hard in the mud and the spray. No foe stands firm in the crush of the fray. Aye. 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 Surges wild as the war drums pound. Arthur fierce while his foes hit the ground. After clash, after clash, after clash, as the ground starts to quake. Roar of the Glade as the warriors collide. Arthur storms forward with power and pride. Blades bite hard in the mud and the spray. No foe stands firm in the crush of the fray.
Hello folks, welcome back to South Kesteven for another episode out here just to the north of Market Deeping. Now, I've got a bit of good news for you. It's the day after the episode you saw yesterday in Baston, and my sore throat seems to have cleared up and I can speak a bit more clearly. That's a bit of good news. If you want a bit of bad news, it's starting to rain, which means I've got my raincoat on, got the semi-wet setup on today. I don't know how wet I'm going to end up by the end of this episode. It could be very wet actually, because the village we're about to walk around, I'm going to be here for quite a while. It's quite a large one. In fact, it's two villages sort of glued together as one. Behind me, you can see the church in this place, and that can be found in the parish of Thurlby. Thurlby, Thorolf's farmstead. For the second time in the Kestevens, we come to a place called Thurlby. This one is a lot different from the one we met in North Kesteven though. It sometimes goes by the name Thurlby by Bourne and sits just west of the A15. It includes the hamlets of Obthorpe and Kate's Bridge. The name Thurlby comes from Old Danish. It means Thorolf's farmstead or village, from the personal name Thorolf. That Viking echo still sits quietly behind modern street names and new houses lining the A15. Roman activity here runs deep. The Car Dyke cuts through the parish while the A15 follows the line of the Roman road King Street. If one feature captures Thurlby today, it is that Roman Car Dyke threading along the fen edge. By the time of Doomsday, Thurlby, which was recorded back then as Turlovby, held several manors and a sizable farming population, and it's grown steadily into today's mixed commuter-friendly village ever since. The Car Dyke is far from being the only thing of note here. St Firmin's Church, with its Saxo-Norman tower and later additions, rises just east of the main road. Cottages like the beautiful Strawberry Thatch brighten the high street, as does the Horseshoe pub. Work here has long been tied to the farming and the land. Medieval manors managed meadow and woodland, but they were later joined by brick kilns and the Bourne and Essendine railway station. Today, some work is centred around the services at Kate's Bridge. Thurlby has not produced any headline-grabbing celebrities, but it has had notable locals. Landowner Thomas Cook Hubbard funded the east window at St Firmin's from Thurlby Grange, while Harold Sneath left his house to become a youth hostel. Local writer and photographer Rex Needle also documented village life in detail. I'm hoping to put at least some of his work on the map in this one. There are some interesting tales to tell here too. One in particular is that of an airship which crash-landed here during World War I. Current talk in parish meetings ranges from planning matters to potholes on the A15 and questions over who owns small pieces of land. Out here, things like that can make a difference. So in all, this is quite a village. We have one anciently shaped by Romans, the Vikings and medieval abbots, and latterly by modern commuters. We will pause by St Firmin's, past thatched cottages and the Horseshoe, and listen for old tales in the fen winds, while tractors and the A15's traffic roll steadily by.
Okay, so I've got a bit to do today. Even though Thurlby is one of those villages that's big, it doesn't have a lot of main landmarks. However, these are the ones I'll be covering, plus I'll also be on the airship story. Thurlby has 3 small hamlets, which sit within its boundaries. One of them is where we're beginning today's video, Kate's Bridge. This is on the A15, just a short run south of Bourne. It sits right by the River Glen, where the road dips and rises again. This place is small, with only a handful of houses, a farm, a tractor dealership, 3 bridges, and a petrol station that drivers use as a handy stop on the way up or down the road. The name Kate's Bridge goes back a long way, all the way indeed to the 1200s. Back then, the spot was written down as Caterbrig, which was passed between 2 bishops. The name links to an old ford here, because this was the only bit of the River Glen with a solid rock bottom, so people could cross safely before any bridge was built. The hamlet grew around this crossing point. Before the bridge took over, boats could travel up the River Glen only as far as here, so Kate's Bridge was once the head of navigation. And why were boats needed here, you ask? Well, in the early 1900s, people from nearby villages worked at a brickyard. So, where is the bridge? Well, the oldest known picture of a bridge here appears on Saxton's map of Lincolnshire from 1579. That's not the bridge that you can find here today, though. There's now a stone bridge that was built in the early 1800s. And here it is. This was built around the time when a man called John Loudon McAdam was working on the turnpike that the A15 now is. No one is totally sure whether he oversaw this bridge, but it fits the period, so it's possible. The old stone arch now no longer carries a road, but instead carries the Macmillan Way footpath. The A15 now crosses the river on an even newer bridge built in the 1970s. Kate's Bridge might be one of those spots you blink and miss, but once you know it's past, it sticks in your mind.
So there you can see the modern bridge, which we actually drove over a couple of times before stopping here. I was only meant to drive over it once, but I missed the entrance to where this old bridge is. I don't know whether you noticed that, but I did. I had to turn around again at the garden centre, which we saw a couple of episodes back. But there you go. That's the bridge that the traffic uses these days, and I'm currently stood on the old one. Right, okay, let's head into Thurlby. But before we get to Thurlby, we have to go through a little hamlet called Obthorpe. One of the other hamlets is the tiny Obthorpe. Not far from the A15, experts say this one means Ubby's secondary settlement, taken from the Old Norse personal name Ubbi and the Old Danish word Thorpe. Over the years, the name has changed shape quite a bit. So has its size. By the 1500s and 1600s, the hamlet had shrunk. Records from 1563 mention only 7 households in Obthorpe, as well as a chapel which was later demolished. Even so, the place kept going, and by the 1800s, Obthorpe Manor had become the biggest house in the hamlet. The stone half of the building dates from around 1580, with a red brick extension added in the early 1800s. The farm has stayed in the same family since 1920. The rest of Obthorpe is still tiny, with only a few homes and farm buildings, but it sits in a spot full of clues about its past. Right, so we have arrived in Thurlby and we're at the church, which you saw at the beginning of this video. We're going to start here and head on around the village. I think it's going to take me about an hour and a half potentially to get around this one. It's quite a large place. Let's see what it's got.
In Thurlby now, our first port of call is St Firmin's Church, just off the old line of King Street. The building is listed, Grade 1, and has parts that go right back to the late Anglo-Saxon period. The tower is the bit that catches your eye first. It was probably finished in around the early 1100s, not long before the church was formally dedicated in 1112 by Bishop Robert Blow. The church is a mix of styles, because different parts were added at different times. It's a cruciform building with a Norman nave, aisles, north and south transepts, chapels, porches, and that western tower which holds 5 bells. Inside the chancel, you can spot an early English piscina and sedilia, and the north chapel has a larger piscina and an aumbrey. The east window has 5 lights and stained glass by Bailey of London, and another Bailey window sits in the north transept. The church also has a Norman cross set into the upper doorway of the tower, and the font is Early English. The whole building was restored in 1856. In 2010, detailed scientific work on the timbers inside the tower took place. Tree ring analysis found that the bell-frame timbers were felled in 1792, while one supporting beam dated to 1455, and 3 lower timbers dated to the mid-1500s.
Okay, so next up we're heading for the Horseshoe, which is a roadside pub that Thurlby has. And here's a good example behind me of when you plan routes, you don't necessarily catch every building. I probably would have said something about this building if I'd have known it had existed. I drove into the church a moment ago and I thought, what's that? I didn't see that on the map. Apparently that's the parish church hall, which even has a date stone on the end of it up here, on the gable facing that way. So yeah, if I'd have known about this, I probably would have said something about it, but I didn't. Let's go to the pub.
Next, we have a pub called the Horseshoe. This is the only pub still trading in the village today, and has been part of village life for a long time. It appears in Kelly's Directory of Lincolnshire in 1885 under the name Horse-Shoe Inn. A fun fact for you, at that time it was run by a man called Andrew, who was also listed in the directory a rat catcher. What a great job title. Alongside the Horseshoe, Thurlby had 3 other known pubs. They were the Crown, the Five Bells, and the Bell Inn, and the latter was also known locally as the Blue Bell. None of these pubs operate now. The Five Bells has been demolished, with the site now serving as a residential location. There is sometimes confusion about whether one of these other pubs later became the Horseshoe, but directory evidence suggests that the Horseshoe and the Bell Inn were separate pubs in 1885, each with its own landlord. As we know, the Five Bells was demolished, so the answer would be no. Today, the Horseshoe continues to run as a food-led pub with regular opening hours. It shares links with nearby pubs such as the Deeping Stage and the Black Horse at Baston, which are mentioned on its website.
Okay, so we've crossed the A15 and we're on the high street now, making our way towards the centre of Thurlby. There's a couple of things to catch just before we reach the absolute dead centre, where there's a shop and a post office and all the usual sort of villagey type stuff. One of the things we do need to talk about before we get to the middle of the village is the Methodist church, which appears on the right hand side just after these houses that are currently on your screen now.
If you look back at how Methodism reached Thurlby, you realise it didn't just appear out of nowhere. By 1807, the Stamford Circuit had been formed, and local tradition says that Methodism really took root in the village thanks to Mrs. Hayes, the mother of William Hayes. Before there was any official building, services were held wherever space could be found, cottages, barns, or anywhere that would fit a few rows of chairs, and a preacher with a loud enough voice. Things became more organised in 1830 when a Sunday school was started. Just 2 years later, in 1832, the village got its first proper Methodist chapel, built on a high street site donated by the Jackson family, and their gift of land made the whole project possible. The building of this chapel has its own little stories too. The very first load of bricks was carted by Edis Smith, and when the chapel finally opened that June, the service was led by a local preacher from Poynton named Wright. The building followed the usual Wesleyan layout of the time: a simple rectangular plan, tall windows, and a front entrance facing the street. It also faced 2 lovely thatched cottages, and it still does.
It's always nice when a Methodist church has got a notice board outside, so it shows you some of the events that take place at it. There's a couple of examples here, including the Thurlby Art and Chat. That's what that's all about, apparently. Okay, opposite this, there are two delightful thatched houses. Let's check these out. This here is Strawberry Thatch. It's one of the village's best known old houses, partly because of its thatched roof and partly because the name sticks in your head. It's an 18th century cottage built from limestone rubble. Strawberry Thatch has 2 stories with small casement windows and a central doorway. The thatch is laid in a traditional Lincolnshire style with a ridge that curves gently along the top. It has a brick chimney stack at one end and timber lintels over the windows. This style of cottage was once common in Lincolnshire villages, but as we know, it's now far less common in the county. That fact alone means this is one of the most recognisable houses in Thurlby, and it still looks much as it did when it was first built. In the centre of Thurlby, there used to be a collection of businesses. Some are still here, others have changed or diversified a bit. One of the latter is Animate's veterinary clinic, founded by a woman called Kirsty Smith. This was a building that once housed a village garage. The shape of the building gives that away. You can easily make out the former forecourt. When Animates took over the site in 2005, the building was refurbished inside to create clinical rooms, but the outside still keeps the long, low shape of a typical garage. The clinic is part of a group which runs practices in Thurlby, Market Deeping and Stamford. The Thurlby site is the main one, and the Animates website lists it as the head office for the group. The clinic offers a full range of small animal services. It's also RCVS accredited. The old schoolhouse next. The building was originally part of Thurlby Board School, which served children from Thurlby and Northorpe. By the mid-20th century, the school had moved to newer premises, and we'll see those later. The school that was here has now been mostly demolished. It was built on Station Road between 1876 and 1877, and the main school building was demolished in 1988. A separate, older institution known as the National School was built on Church Street in 1853. Before either of those school buildings, records indicate a schoolmaster named William Baker in 1585, and in 1848 a schoolroom was located in the north aisle of the church's Chantry Chapel. There was also a dame school run by a Miss Barber, active on the High Street until 1886. On the next bend, where Station Road starts to curve towards the site of the old railway line, there's a house with a central archway. This used to be a workshop called Watson's Joinery. If you go to Google Street View, you can see what this used to look like. It has images from 2009. Looking at that, it would appear the old joinery building has been rebuilt in becoming the house it is now. I've no idea what happened to the business, but it's another one that's gone from Thurlby's High Street, only this time it's now a residence. Okay, so for the past sort of 5 or 10 minutes I've been walking along Station Road. Now Thurlby used to have a station. It was situated behind me there. Well, these days there's no station, there's no railway line. What there is a Lincolnshire County Council Highways depot, which has taken over the site of the station. Amelia, tell us a bit about this, please.
This is a Lincolnshire County Council Highways depot, which sits on a spot that once had trains rumbling through it every day. It stands just off Station Road, right where Thurlby railway station used to be. If you walk past the depot today, it is hard to imagine steam engines pulling up here. But this was once a busy stop on the Old Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway, which ran across the east of England and linked small villages like Thurlby with bigger towns. Thurlby station was handy for local travel, farm goods, and parcels heading out across the region. It opened in 1872 as part of the Bourne to Essendine branch. It had a single platform and a siding for goods. Trains were never huge here, but the stop was useful for the local farms. The line struggled once road travel grew, and passenger trains ended in 1951. Goods traffic carried on for a short while, but the line closed fully in 1956. After that, the track was lifted, the buildings were taken down. The shape of the yard follows the old track bed. Lincolnshire County Council later turned it all into a highways depot. It now holds salt barns, vehicles and equipment that keep the local roads safe. When snow hits, gritters roll out from here to cover the A15 and nearby routes. It's not fancy, but it plays a big part in keeping the area moving.
Now, of course, I've said this a few times over the years. I'm famously not an expert really on anything. I just report on what I find and what I can see. And I reckon that this farm track here, opposite the highways depot site, I reckon this is where the railway line once came through, because it's pretty much straight and it lines up perfectly with the side of the station. What do we reckon?
We've reached another chapel now. This is on Manthorpe Lane. The building you see today dates from 1861, a date which is carved into the stone above the doorway. This is better known locally as the Top Chapel. Its story starts when a group of villagers split from the Wesleyan Methodists in 1854. At first, they made do with whatever space they could find, like a barn on Whitechapel Row, then a room on Crown Lane. The land for the new chapel came from a man named John Fields, who sold the plot for £25. The congregation then raised £280 to put up the building, which was no small sum at the time. When it finally opened, the ceremony was led by John Gutteridge of Manchester. One thing that still stands out today is the chapel's yellow brick frontage. It's unusual for this part of Lincolnshire, where red brick tends to dominate. The builders added ash-laid masonry around the openings and topped it all off with a chalet-style roof. In 1904, an adjoining schoolroom was added. It became the setting for all sorts of weekday events, lessons, meetings, and the usual run of village gatherings that keep a place ticking along. Eventually, as numbers fell, and it closed, it would find a new life as a private home.
Okay, and if you live at Top Chapel, you've got a brilliant view straight into the middle of Thurlby village. And you're literally as well just a couple of steps away from the local shop, which you can see just there on the left-hand side. The shop and post office in Thurlby sits right in the middle of village life on a street called the Green. The shop part stocks the usual bits you need in a hurry, from snacks to milk, and it's been a steady stop to that end for years. The building itself sits on a plot that's been used for trade for a longer time. Old Ordnance Survey maps show a shop on this corner in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, marked as PO for post office on several editions. The layout of the roads around it has barely changed. The post office side of the business has changed though, just like in most villages. It's not a large branch, but it handles everyday tasks like parcel returns, bill payments and cash withdrawals. It's the place where the local people get things done. Earlier we learned there was a pub here called the Crown Inn. Here is that old pub on Crown Lane. It's now a private house, but the shape and the position of this building match the footprint shown on old maps. The Crown Inn appears in several trade directories. It was a beer house or an inn during the late Victorian and early 20th centuries. Its records go back to 1842. It went on to be owned by the Soames Brewery and was sold to Stewart and Patterson in 1949. Between 1954 and 1957, it was run by Geoffrey and Muriel Middleton before they emigrated. The building itself is believed to be much older than these dates all suggest. It's approximately 500 years old in fact, because it features rustic elements like multiple fireplaces and a converted barn that was used for dances. So we've seen the old schoolhouse, now it's time for the modern one. Thurlby Primary School sits on Crown Lane 2. It's officially called Thurlby Community Primary Academy, and its website explains that it's part of the Voyage Education Partnership, a Lincolnshire Academy trust. It serves children from the village and nearby places, and it's grown over the years as the village has expanded. The school building has changed shape since the 20th century. The footprint was once smaller than it is now, with just the one main block. The modern layout includes classrooms, a hall, outdoor play areas and a field behind the main buildings. The most recent Ofsted inspection rated the school as good, noting strong teaching and a friendly atmosphere. It's a place full of activity. Now, we've seen two of the three hamlets that lie within Thurlby's boundaries, but what about the third? Well, north of Thurlby there's a place called Manthorpe. It used to be a separate settlement years ago, but the expansion of both it and Thurlby means now it's conjoined. It was quite small, with houses spread out along the road rather than grouped together. Even today, with all the newer houses around it and within infill spots, the name appears on modern maps, keeping the hamlet's identity in place. Northorpe literally means North Farmstead or North Settlement. It grew around farms, cottages and small holdings. Northorpe remains a small, lived-in corner of Thurlby today, with a long past and a simple, practical layout that's lasted for a long time. Passing through a pretty large housing estate here now, just to the south of the main road through Northorpe. What we're doing here effectively is we're forming a link between Northorpe and the biggest open recreational space that Thurlby has to its name, and that would be Lawrence Park. Now, I could have done this when I was at the school a few moments ago, but I opted to do it this way because from Lawrence Park there's a set of footpaths which run across some fields back towards the beginning. That's going to be fun in the rain, isn't it? It's going to be squelchy underfoot, I think. So here we are in the housing estate. This is what it looks like. Pretty standard modern stuff, nothing historic about this. Lawrence Park is just at the end of this road. To get back to Thurlby we need to cross Lawrence Park. This is the main green space where loads of village activities take place. The field is used for sports, school events and the usual run of outdoor fun that keeps a place busy. It's a simple, open space, but that's exactly why it works so well. Kids can run, adults can watch, and there's plenty of room for football, picnics and the odd dog walk. One of the biggest users of Lawrence Park is Thurlby Tigers, the village's youth football club. They train and play here through the football season. The park also links neatly with the village hall, which sits right beside it. That means events can spill between the hall and the field when needed. Local groups often use both spaces together. The play area next to the field is handy too, with swings and climbing frames that keep the younger kids busy. Our last stop here is on the eastern side of Thurlby, close to the old Carr Dyke. This is where you'll find the manor house. It sits in a spot that's been lived in for a long time, thanks to the Carr Dyke running nearby. The manor house is one of the oldest properties in the village, and it appears on historic maps from the 19th century onwards. It's far older than that though. It's believed to be mid-17th century, or maybe even older, although it has been extended and altered a bit since. In 1719 it was possibly altered by Robert Wright, but we know for sure its west wing was partly rebuilt in 1878 following a fire. And its purpose? Well, it was a prominent farming family home, before later serving as a hostel. My bottom half is completely soaked now after walking over those fields. Good job I've got a change of clothing in the car, isn't it? Right, we have one more thing to cover before we leave Thurlby behind, and that's what happened during the war.
If you were standing somewhere in Thurlby in the autumn of 1916, you'd have had quite a shock. Back then, seeing an aeroplane was unusual enough in the sky, but spotting an airship drifting overhead was something else entirely. Airships were huge. They were long, cigar-shaped giants that moved slowly and almost silently. People found them exciting and a bit scary at the same time. So, when one of them suddenly started dropping out of the sky towards Thurlby, the place was thrown into total chaos. It all happened on Wednesday the 15th of November. Over in Bourne, Dr. John Gilpin was working away in his surgery when a message arrived saying he was needed urgently in Thurlby. He jumped into his car and headed straight there, only to find the main street blocked. Not only that, the air was filled with a strong smell of petrol. Villagers were running about, shouting to each other and trying to work out what on earth had just landed on their doorstep. What had happened was one of these airships had crash-landed. The aircraft in question was the Royal Navy airship SS-39, normally used for spotting submarines. It had set off from Wormwood Scrubs in London earlier that day, heading for Cranwell. But somewhere over Lincolnshire, things started to go wrong. The airship began losing height, and an engine problem meant the crew couldn't control the descent. Before long, it was drifting dangerously low over Thurlby, circling above the rooftops and only just missing telegraph wires. The airship continued to drop until it finally came down at Garwood's Corner, right between the village hall and a house next to the school. As it fell, some of the trailing lines wrapped around a chimney and pulled several bricks loose. One of the aircrew was hit and injured, and Dr. Gilpin had to squeeze himself between the balloon bag and the wall of the house to reach him. The rescuers managed to get the injured man into a nearby house until he could be taken to hospital. Not long after, 2 lorries arrived from Cranwell to deal with the wreck. The crew set about deflating the airship by cutting open the gas cells with knives, and the huge sheets of fabric were packed up and taken away for repair. By this point, word had spread far beyond the village. People walked in from Baston, Langtoft and Bourne just to get a look at the wreckage. Some even helped themselves to souvenirs like bits of copper pipe, wire, cable and scraps of fabric. For a village like Thurlby, it must have felt like something out of a film.
Thurlby is one of those places that looks small on a map, but turns out to have far more going on once you start walking it. The hamlets of Obthorpe and Kate's Bridge as well each have their own quirks and long recorded pasts. What stands out most is how much of Thurlby's past is still visible. Everywhere you look, something links back to farming, travel, or to the people who shaped the village over the years. The former railway station lives on as the LCC Highways Depot, still busy in its own way as gritters roll out in the winter. And then, of course, there's the moment in 1916 when Thurlby found itself at the centre of a scene no one could have imagined. It remains one of the most dramatic events ever recorded here, and it still sits in the village's memory like a tale waiting to be retold.
If you'd been in Thurlby that autumn day, you'd have stopped in your tracks with a stare. Not a cloud in sight, just a shape up high, drifting slow through the cool, crisp air. Folks pointed up at that giant form, a long grey shadow in the sky. No one guessed what was coming next as the airship started dropping by. Over in Bourne, Dr. Gilpin heard a knock at his surgery door. Get to Thurlby quick, there's trouble ahead. So he grabbed his coat and tore down the road in his motor car, straight into petrol fumes and fear. Villagers shouting, running about as the wreck loomed ever near. SS-39 came down right through the heart of the village street, circling low past the telegraph wires, skimming rooftops by a beat. One normal Wednesday turned upside down with a thud and a roar and a cry. SS-39 came down from the quiet of the Lincolnshire sky. It had left Wormwood Scrubs that morn, bound for Cranwell's open ground. But an engine fault over Lincolnshire meant the crew were losing sound. Hide and hope as they drifted low, fighting hard just to stay upright. Thurlby watched as the monster dipped, a slow fall none could fight. It hit at Garwood's corner hard, between the hall and the schoolhouse wall. Trailing lines caught a chimney stack, sending bricks in a sudden fall. One poor airman took the hit, and Gilpin squeezed right through between balloon cloth and the stone, doing what he had to do. SS-39 came down right through the heart of the village street, circling low past the telegraph wires, skimming rooftops by a beat. One normal Wednesday turned upside down with a thud and a roar and a cry. SS-39 came down from the quiet of the Lincolnshire sky. Two lorries rolled in from Cranwell Base, knives in hand for the gas-filled skin. Great sheets folded, hauled away, as crowds kept pouring in from Baston, Langtoft, Bourne. They came to stare at the wreck on the ground, copper pipes and scraps of cloth pocketed all around. SS-39 came down, and the tale still lingers today, a moment frozen in village 39 came down from the quiet of the Lincolnshire sky.
Hello folks, welcome back to South Kesteven once again. Now you find me in this episode beginning in a railway cutting. There's not many of these in Lincolnshire because generally speaking the land is flat, isn't it? There's not many hills around, but there's a hill here, and to get through that hill the engineers built this thing you can see behind me. That is Toft Tunnel, which takes its name from the village of Toft, which we'll be seeing in this episode. Toft is part of a much bigger parish though. It's called Toft with Lound and Manthorpe. Toft with Lound and Manthorpe, homestead with grove and manny settlement. Welcome to the parish of Toft with Lound and Manthorpe, just off the A6121. This one has 3 small villages which sit on gentle ground above the fens, with fields, woods and lanes linking them all together. The names tell us a lot. Toft is a common word in eastern England for a plot or a homestead. Lound comes from Old Norse lunda, meaning a grove or a wood, and Manthorpe is from an Old Danish personal name, manny. People have farmed this ridge since the early times, with the parish recorded in the Domesday Book under several lords, including Hereward the Wake and Peterborough Abbey. Today the parish holds around 300 residents, with modern housing threaded among older farmsteads. These might be small places, but they have a lot to talk about. Amelia will be busy today, and especially so at the Bowthorpe Oak, a vast hollow tree which may be around 1,000 years old. With a girth of over 13 metres, it's now carefully protected. Other places catch the eye too. To the north, Toft Tunnel was once the only tunnel on the Midland and Great Northern Railway system. That's now a wildlife-rich reserve with flowers and butterflies. Toft Golf Course is also going to be highlighted here too. Work here is long centred on the land. Manor Farmhouse in Toft, a 17th century listed building, tells us of centuries of mixed farming. Today, agriculture still matters, but it's the golf club and the attached country house hotel that provide most of the important local jobs now. Famous names are modest rather than grand here. That said, as we know, Hereward the Wake held land here before the Norman Conquest. More recently, local historians such as Sue Cork and Dick Mundy have written detailed booklets about Manthorpe, Toft and Lound. Stories cling mainly to the Bowthorpe Oak. It's said to have hosted dinners for 20 guests inside its hollow trunk, and later teas for chapel children. There are railway tales too surrounding Toft Tunnel, from the hard work of the navvies who built it to those who actually used it. Parish life today has its practical concerns though. This is a very rural area, so things like lambing time and keeping dogs under control are big concerns. Then again, so are food waste collections and the mobile library route. It's a mixed bag. So, as we set off along these lanes, we'll be driving through a place shaped by an oak tree, a railway, and golf. The ridge above the fens carries deep roots and busy present life, and it's all on display within Toft, Lound and Manthorpe.
Amelia's features.
Hello everybody. Today we may only have a set of small villages to cover, but believe it or not, these are loaded. I'll be talking about the tunnel, the golf course, and that massive tree south of Manthorpe. It should be a good one.
Okay, so I've parked above Toft Tunnel, and that's going to begin this episode. I always think old railway tunnels look really spooky when you stand right next to them, and this one is absolutely no exception. Now, you're not supposed to walk through this because obviously you can see there's a big fence blocking the entrance, but it looks like at some point someone has actually broken through that fence and gone through it. I'm not sure whether I should go in there. I'll probably just stay on the outside. So let's talk about Toft Tunnel to begin this episode.
Our start point today is just to the north of Toft, near Lound. This here is a spot that doesn't look like much at first glance. It's a dip in the ground with some scrub and a long stretch of old railway track bed. But this is where Toft Tunnel sits, hidden under the grass and the trees. Back in the late 1800s, railway engineers had a real puzzle on their hands. They needed to build a line between Bourne and Saxby, but the ground west of Bourne rose in a series of ridges. Instead of going over the top, they decided to dig straight through. Work began in 1890 with around 100 navvies, but that number soon shot up to about 400 as the job grew tougher. They had to dig out around 300,000 cubic yards of shale just to make space for the tunnel. The tunnel they created was 330 yards long and was built wide enough for 2 tracks. It needed around 2.5 million bricks for the lining, and a lot of those came from Henry Kingston's brickworks in Bourne. Spoil from the tunnel was hauled away by train and used to build an embankment at Spalding. It was a massive operation, but it was eventually completed in 1893. For decades, it was the only tunnel on the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway system, but by 1959, the line had closed. Today, the tunnel itself is fenced off because it's now a protected bat hibernation site. The land above and around it, though, is now a wildlife haven.
Now be aware, if you want to see Toft Tunnel for yourself, you have to come down into the cutting, which is not an easy thing to do. There are some steps from the road and there is a parking space above the tunnel entrance, so to be fair, it's set up for you to come down here, but it's something I wouldn't necessarily recommend because these steps are quite steep coming down, and they're probably even worse going back up. And that's exactly what I've got to do now. I've got to make my way up these steps and back up to the road. When we eventually reach the car, we're going to be heading to Lound. So now we're in Lound. This is close to the A6121 and it's grouped with Toft for most official records. Lound today is a tiny place and it's easy to pass it without realising, but it has a long past and a few surprises once you start digging into its history. Lound is old enough to appear in the Domesday related records, with evidence that it existed in 1086 and even had its own chapel in medieval times. Nothing of that chapel survives above ground now. The hamlet used to be a bit larger than it is today before shrinking back over time. It's one of those places where the past is still there, just hidden under the fields. By the 1870s, Lound was described as a hamlet within the parish of Witham-on-the-Hill. That's the way the area was arranged back then, before later boundary changes. Staying in the car, we're now making our way to Toft, the small hamlet which is arguably the centre of the entire parish today. It feels small and friendly. It sits on the East Glen River, so there's always a bit of water trickling through the area. Even though it doesn't have a church today, some historical records say that the patronage of a former church in Toft was once gifted to Crowland Abbey in 1113 after a huge fire damaged the abbey in 1091 and rebuilding began soon afterwards. Nothing of that old church stands now, but Toft has a few features that make it feel a bit different from other tiny hamlets. On the southern edge sits the Toft Hotel golf course, and in the village itself is the old Butcher's Arms. Let's go and see both of them. So this is Toft, and there's not much point putting the Strava on to walk around this because we're only going to be here for literally 2 landmarks and they're sort of almost next door to each other anyway. There's mainly housing. You can see we've got a nice couple of houses here. And one house in particular stands out, and that would be this big white one, because that used to be Toft's pub.
So this is the old Butcher's Arms, which looks like a house today, but was once a pub that served the hamlet for generations. These days it's in private use, but the building still carries clues about its past, including parts said to date back over 400 years. The Butcher's Arms appears in White's Directory of 1856, where it was run by Thomas Howitt, who was listed as both a butcher and a victualler. That mix of jobs wasn't unusual at the time. It wasn't a grand place, but it was clearly important enough to be noted. In the early 1900s, the pub was still going strong. John Stubley is recorded as the publican in 1919, and the name Alfred J. Stubley appears in Kelly's Directory of 1930. That suggests the pub stayed in the same family for a good stretch of time. At some point, after the late 20th century, the Butcher's Arms closed its doors as a pub and moved into private ownership. In 2025, it was on the market with an asking price of over £500,000, so it's certainly worth a few quid, as buildings go. Today, if you walk past it, you'd never guess how busy it once was, unless you knew the history. It's now just a smart house in a small hamlet, but the records keep its past alive. The Butcher's Arms has left a paper trail that helps us piece together what life in Toft was like over the years.
Now, if you walk a couple of 100 yards up the road from that old pub, you get to Toft's other main feature, and that would be this massive golf course. There it is. That's next.
So now we're at the golf course, which sits beside the Toft House Hotel. Its setting is a bit different from what you might expect in this part of Lincolnshire. Instead of flat fields, this sits on rolling hills, which means you get long views across the countryside and some fun changes in height as you play. The hotel next to the course began life as a converted farmhouse, opening to the public in 1979. A few years later, after a 4-year design and build process, the golf course opened in April 1988. It was built on the original farmland, using the natural slopes of the Lincolnshire escarpment. The result was a layout that feels different from the flatter courses nearby. Those hills mean you get uphill and downhill tee shots, which golfers say are great practice. Toft Golf Course is an 18-hole course, usually played as a par 71 or par 72 depending on the tees. The greens can be a little slow at times, but the fairways are forgiving, which helps newer players. One thing this place has is excellent drainage, so it's a course for all seasons, with no temporary winter greens needed. That's a big plus in Lincolnshire. Winter rain can make some courses boggy. Toft has a driving range and a pro shop that's considered to be one of the best presented in the county. And the hotel has 20 ensuite bedrooms, a bar with an open fire, and a dining room serving local food. So if you're a more enthusiastic golfer, you can stay overnight.
And the Country House Hotel is over the road. Here it is. There we go. Isn't that an imposing building? Right in the middle of a small village. Now, that's pretty much it for Toft. And obviously we've dealt with Lound already, so that just leaves Manthorpe, which means we're heading towards the end of this episode already. A very short one, this, even though there are 3 settlements in it. So let's drive down into Manthorpe, and that one's actually going to give us a little walk around. Back in the car, we're now off to Manthorpe. It lies only half a mile east of the main road, so it's easy to miss unless you know where to turn. Manthorpe today is small, but it has a long past tucked into its records. Again, it's old enough to appear in the Domesday Book. In there, its land was recorded under St Peter de Burgh and Gilbert de Gand. The name itself comes from the Old Danish personal name Manny. That tells us the place was already established by the Anglo-Saxon period and carried on into medieval times. For a while, Manthorpe belonged to Witham-on-the-Hill, but in 1866 it became its own civil parish. That didn't last forever though. In 1931 it was abolished and merged with Toft and Lound to form what we know today. You won't find any shops or big attractions here. This is a sleepy little hamlet. Manthorpe used to have some sort of religious building, but it's not totally clear what it was. On the old OS maps you saw at the start of this video, there's a chapel marked sort of here. I couldn't find anything about it though. So certainly not a big place, Manthorpe, but certainly bigger than Toft and Lound. And in the middle of the main street, you can see we've got a post box. It's served by a post box, that's good. There's also a little book exchange in the old telephone box. And next door to this, or almost next door, there's a house in between. You can see we've got a big building here, right? Now this is a farm shop. And initially when I saw this on the map, I thought, oh, that's not going to be much. Turns out I was wrong. Amelia, tell us a bit about this.
This is Mill Farm, the sort of place people visit when they want proper local produce rather than supermarket stuff. This stands out because it's one of the few places in the area where you can buy food straight from the farm that produced it. The shop is closely linked with W.H. Munton and Son, a long-running family butchers based at the same address. It's not flashy or loud, but it has something better going for it. It's been run by the same family since the 1940s. It's best known for its home-fed lamb. They don't have just a handful of sheep either. The farm keeps an 800-strong flock. That means the lamb on the counter has come straight from the fields just outside the door. Over the years, they've added beef, pork, mutton, and all sorts of homemade bits, like sausages and burgers. Mill Farm Shop isn't just well-liked, it's award-winning. It was named Great Food Club Food Producer of the Year for 2021 and 2022, which is a pretty big deal for a small farm shop in southern Lincolnshire. On top of that, it was voted Rutland and Stamford's favourite independent butcher, which tells you customers really rate it. These aren't the sort of awards you get by accident. And judging by those awards and the loyal customers it has, it's doing a pretty fine job.
And it clearly is well used as well, because in the short amount of time I've been stood outside it, there's been at least 3 people who have walked in there and bought something from the farm shop. It's clearly a very important thing to Manthorpe. Okay, we are pretty much through this little place, so we're going to head back to the car now, and then we're going to take a drive down to the biggest and probably best known feature of this entire area. It's a tree, believe it or not. Okay, so unbeknownst to me, you have to pay an entrance fee to go and see the Bowthorpe Oak, but it's only £2.50, so it's not exactly going to break the bank. So I've paid that, and now I'm on a footpath which goes through the farm shop, which you can find here in Bowthorpe, and this will take me directly to the tree, apparently, according to the woman, the very nice woman in the shop. So here's the view I've got. There we go. The tree is somewhere over there. In fact, I think it's that one.
If you head out to Bowthorpe Park Farm, close to Manthorpe, you'll find one of the most famous trees in the whole of Lincolnshire, the Bowthorpe Oak. It sits in a field close to the farmhouse, and even though it's on private land, the owners have allowed visitors for years. The tree is impossible to miss. It looks more like a wooden cave than a normal oak, because it has a huge hollow centre and thick limbs that twist outwards like old beams. The Bowthorpe Oak is recorded on the Ancient Tree Inventory, and its numbers are huge. Its girth is around 13.3 metres. That's about 44 feet. That makes it the largest girthed oak in the UK. The Woodland Trust lists it as a pedunculate oak, and experts believe it's over 1,000 years old, possibly older. The hollow trunk is so big that people once held dinner parties inside it. I'm not kidding. There are photos that you can find online which show tables and chairs set up under its enormous wooden arch. That hollow didn't appear overnight either. Over hundreds of years, the centre slowly decayed, leaving a huge open space while the outer trunk kept growing. The tree is still alive and producing leaves each year, even though the middle is open to the sky. It's often described as one of the most impressive ancient oaks in Britain, not because of its height or even its age, but because of its unusual shape. You don't realise how big it is until you're standing right next to it. Today, the tree is a literal living reminder of how long a single tree can last when it's looked after, and how much history can gather around something that's never moved an inch.
So we've got a little plaque here that tells us this is one of 50 Great British Trees. It was designated as such in 2002. Now, we've seen some fantastic trees on this channel, haven't we? We've seen the major oak in Sherwood Forest, we've seen the Martin oak a few weeks ago in Cheshire, and now we've seen the Bowthorpe oak as well. And isn't it just amazing how a tree can be such a fantastic landmark if it's marketed right? For £2.50 you get to see one of the oldest trees in the country. Brilliant, isn't it?
The parish of Toft with Lound and Manthorpe is essentially 3 small villages scattered along the ridge above the fens. You'd look at them maybe and think they're very inconsequential. They're far from it. As you move through the parish, the landmarks jump out. Toft Tunnel still lies hidden under the scrub, built with millions of bricks and once the only tunnel on the Midland and Great Northern Line. The Butcher's Arms stands as a reminder of village life, and the Toft Golf Course brings visitors up onto the hills. Manthorpe adds Mill Farm Shop, famous for its home-fed lamb and long family history stretching back to the 1940s. But the place that steals the show is out at Bowthorpe Park Farm, where a huge hollow giant once held dinner parties inside of it. It's the sort of tree that demands its own song.
With a trunk like a grand old room on the land, folk gathered inside where the hollow grew wide, and a feast could be served as they planned. Oh, the Bowthorpe oak, bold and bright, a giant that dazzles in glorious light, with a trunk carved by age like a natural stage. It carries old wonders in plain sight. They say chapel kids sat in its shade, drank tea where the cool hollows stayed. Farm tales drift near as the great girth grew clear, and the bark kept its deep-ribbed parade. Oh, the Bothorpe Oak, bold and bright, a giant that dazzles in glorious light, with a trunk carved by age, like a natural stage. It carries old wonders in plain sight. Some claim that a pony once slept in the nook where the old curve swept, and a farmer would grin, saying, "Step right in. This oak keeps the secrets it's kept." Oh, the Bothorpe Oak, bold and bright, a giant that dazzles in glorious light, with a trunk carved by age, like a natural stage. It carries old wonders in plain sight. Oh, the Bothorpe Oak, so proud and tall, a natural marvel beside Bothorpe Hall, with its deep wooden cave and the legends folk gave. It still stands as the king of them all.
Hello folks, time to wrap up this latest run here in South Kesteven with a parish that has 2 villages within it. One of them was quite famous at one time, and it's all to do with what's behind me right here. You can see there's a lane there, and if you were to go up that lane, which I don't recommend by the way, because any unauthorised persons will get charged a fee of £1,000 apparently, according to that sign. If you were to go up that lane, you would find what is basically the remains of a spa. People came here to sample the waters because they believed it was going to make them better. You can find that spa in Braceboro, which is within the parish of Braceboro and Wilsthorpe. Braceboro and Wilsthorpe, defended place and Vyfill settlement. Lastly this week we come to Braceboro and Wilsthorpe, a pair of villages that sit in the East Glen Valley between Stamford and Bourne, with Peterborough about 12 miles to the south. The two lie less than a mile apart, divided by the river. The name Braceboro is thought to end with the Old English word bur, meaning a defended place, while the first part is uncertain. Wilsthorpe comes from an Old Norse personal name, probably Vyfill. Human activity runs from Roman times, with a possible villa and the Roman road King Street nearby. Over centuries, these two stayed small farming settlements. Then in 1931, the two civil parishes were joined into today's single entity. If one place captures modern Braceboro best, it's Braceboro Hall, now a residential care home in a substantial period house with gardens on Church Lane. It brings work, visitors and activity into the village each and every day. There are 2 churches here. St Margaret's Church in Braceboro has medieval roots and had a Victorian restoration, while St Faith's at Wilsthorpe was rebuilt in 1715. That one has a knightly effigy. Braceboro also has the site of a spa and the railway station that went with it. Work here has long centred on farming the heavy Lincolnshire soils. In the 19th century, the spa, the railway and Peterborough Waterworks pumping station added jobs, but today, agriculture, Braceboro Hall Care Home and commuting to nearby towns provide most employment. Famous names are thin on the ground, but again, Hereward the Wake knew this one. He was said to have been born near Bourne, just up the road, while the Wake family may be connected to the knightly effigy in Wilsthorpe's church. Wilsthorpe also steps into literary folklore through M.R. James, who used it as the real-world setting for his ghost story, Mr. Humphreys and His Inheritance. It makes sense. The lanes, the old church and its earthworks lend themselves to tales of things half seen at dusk along the Roman road and the river. Right now, big infrastructure is a topic of discussion. The Mallard Pass solar farm, partly in South Kesteven, has raised strong feelings about landscape, farmland and energy, and so too have plans for a new Lincolnshire reservoir, a debate very close to these fields. In Braceboro and Wilsthorpe, we have Roman roads under our feet, Doomsday Fields at our side, 2 churches and a hall ahead, and solar farms on the horizon. It's a small one to finish the week with, but it's by no means boring. Let's go.
Hello everyone. One last batch of landmarks for me this week in South Kesteven. Today I'll be tackling the 2 churches, a former railway station and Braceboro Hall. Andy's on the rest. See you in a few.
Okay, so I've driven to my start point here, which is in Braceboro, and we're going to cover the spa first with a bit of trepidation because I'm absolutely not going to walk up that drive. I don't want to get charged £1,000. So I'm going to stay here. I'm allowed to be here. This is a public right-of-way. So we'll cover this, and we'll also cover the railway station as well, which used to serve this. Now the railway station was somewhere sort of here, and you can see there's like a track that goes across. That's where the railway line was. Our first landmark today is something you can't see, or at least not anymore. Braceboro Spa sat just outside the village of Braceboro in South Kesteven, and for a long time it was a place people travelled to for its spring water. The spot was tucked into the grounds of what later became Spa House, and it had a bit of a reputation in the Victorian era. Folks came along thinking the water might help them feel better, and the whole place had a steady stream of visitors right up until the onset of World War II. The spring water had a high level of calcium carbonate. Visitors could come in, take the waters, and spend time in the bathhouse. In 1939 it finally closed, but its popularity had already dipped by then as newer medical ideas took over. Braceboro Spa even had its own railway station for a while. The station, called Braceboro Spa Halt, opened in 1860. It sat here on the former Essendine to Bourne line. It made it easier for visitors to reach the baths during the Victorian period. The line later became part of the Great Northern Railway, but the station closed in 1951 after the spa itself had already shut down. It's one of those little details that shows how much interest the place once had. This was never a big station, but it had a steady trickle of passengers. The halt was very simple. It had a short platform, a small shelter and a basic layout. It wasn't staffed and passengers had to signal the train if they wanted to board. Right, we've made it into Braceboro village now, and it's not the easiest place to park in, especially not where I want to start this walk. I'm starting the walk here on this little bridge, which is running over this watercourse. Not quite sure what watercourse this is, but there it is anyway. And I remember saying in the West Lindsey series a long time ago about trying to leave enough space for people to pass if it's narrow. The biggest problem you've got in Lincolnshire, of course, is farm traffic, and hopefully I've left enough space there being parked on this bridge for a tractor to come past. If I haven't, then I'll be very, very surprised. Right, so there is Braceboro in front of us. We're going to walk from the northern end pretty much all the way to the southern end. The southern end is where the church is, which you can see over there. So we're going to make our way between these 2 points. And between here and there, it's mainly housing, but there is also a care home I want to put on the map as well. In the village itself now, this is the old school here in Braceboro. It sits on the main street through the village and is now used as the village hall. It's a small building that first appears in 19th century records. It was built in 1871 according to its date stone. Braceboro School was typical of that time. One main room, a simple layout, and a teacher who taught children of different ages together. By the 1930s and 1940s, small schools like this were closing as pupils were moved to larger sites in nearby towns. Braceboro's school building did not fall out of use. Instead, it was kept as a meeting place and later became the village hall, while still retaining the look of a Victorian Lincolnshire school. It's one of the oldest public buildings in Braceboro, and it's been part of village life for well over 100 years. Okay, so we're about halfway through Braceboro already. I told you it's not the biggest of villages in the world. And sort of at the halfway point, you have Braceboro Hall. This building right here.
Here's another building that's been part of Braceboro for a long time. Braceboro Hall today is used as a care home, but the building has a long past that goes back to the 19th century. It was originally a mid-Victorian country house, built in the 1840s, with later updates in the late 1800s. It was designed in a Tudor-style layout, with tall chimneys, stone dressings, and a strong, square shape that made it stand out. Old maps from the 1880s and 1900s mark it clearly as Braceboro Hall, so it was already well known by then. The hall was built for the Hales family, who were landowners in the area. The family were residents through the late 19th century, and their estate included farmland, gardens, and outbuildings. The house was large enough to need servants, so several staff lived on site. After the Hales family left, it was used as a private home for different owners, and parts of the estate were sold off. The Second World War brought changes across Lincolnshire, and although Braceboro Hall was not taken over by the military, the estate did see more activity. Its farms nearby, for example, supported wartime food production. By the 1950s and 1960s, the hall was no longer used as a large private house, and the upkeep of such a big building became harder. And so, it was converted into a care home, which still uses the original Victorian house as its centre.
Okay, we've made it all the way to the end of the road, and that's where the church is. And a very nice church this is too. There it is.
St Margaret of Antioch's Church is another one of the oldest buildings in the village, with parts dating back to the 12th century. The earliest stonework includes the south doorway, which has Norman carving that still survives today. The church has been altered at different points, and most of the main structure you see today comes from the 13th and 14th centuries. The tower is from the 14th century, built in a simple, sturdy style with battlements at the top. The nave and the chancel were updated in the medieval period. The porch was added later, and that still has its old timber roof. Inside, the church keeps a mix of features from different ages. There's a 13th century font with a round bowl, for example. Pevsner mentioned in his work that the church once had fragments of a wall painting, though these are now very faint. The pulpit and pews are Victorian, added during a 19th century restoration that repaired the roof and updated the seating. The churchyard holds gravestones from the 18th and 19th centuries, including several with carved symbols such as anchors and flowers. The churchyard layout has changed little over time, but the Lich Gate is a later addition, built in the early 20th century.
Now, in an ideal world, there'd be a footpath that runs through the churchyard and takes us back to that little bridge where we started, but alas, there isn't one. I've got to turn around and go back. So, when we reach the car, we're then going to be heading for Wilsthorpe, which has got a nice little church of its own. So that's Braceboro, but what about Wilsthorpe? Well, that village is laid out in almost exactly the same form as it was 200 years ago, with a church, farms and a tight cluster of houses along its one main lane. The parish church, St Faith's, is the oldest building in Wilsthorpe. Wilsthorpe is well known among fans of ghost stories because of M.R. James. His tale, Mr Humphreys and His Inheritance, published in 1911, is set in a fictional village called Wilsthorpe, which he based partly on this real one. James visited Lincolnshire often. As such, he used names from the county in several tales. In the story, Mr Humphreys inherits an estate with a maze, a summer house and a strange past. The plot follows him as he explores the maze and uncovers the dark history of the previous owner, Mr Wilson. Wilson's reasons for creating the maze weren't entirely innocent. The maze in the tale is the centre of the mystery. Humphreys finds a pillar inside it with carvings that seem to point to something hidden. As he digs deeper, he learns that Mr Wilson had been involved in odd rituals and the maze was built to hide something dangerous. The tale ends with Mr Humphreys escaping the maze after a frightening encounter, and the pillar is later removed. James never said the real Wilsthorpe had a maze, but he used the name because it suited the quiet rural setting he wanted. The link is strong enough that readers still visit the area to picture the scenes. It's fun to think this village inspired one of the most famous stories in English ghost fiction.
Wilsthorpe once had a railway station, just like Braceboro did. It was located here. It was another tiny stop on the Old Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway line, and close to the River Glen. It opened in 1926 as Wilsthorpe Crossing Halt. It lasted only 32 years, closing in 1958 when the M and GN shut down almost entirely. What makes Wilsthorpe Halt especially interesting is its link to the Peterborough Corporation Waterworks. The waterworks, built in the early 20th century, drew water from the gravel beds near the River Glen. The railway line ran right past the site, and there was even a railway siding that linked the two together. The waterworks was an important part of Peterborough's early water supply system. It included pumping stations, filter beds and deep wells, one of which was a massive 52 feet deep. Today, nothing remains of Wilsthorpe Holt. The platform has gone, the crossing keeper's house has changed hands, and the track bed is now part of a farm track and a footpath. But the link between the Holt and the waterworks is still remembered.
And much like as in Braceboro, it's pretty obvious where the route of the line is. It's right here. You can see it's been turned into a farm track now, and you would potentially never know if you drove past this that this used to be a railway line, but it was.
So there may not be a maze, but there is a church. St. Faith of Aquitaines Church has a dedication that's unusual in Lincolnshire, and only a handful of churches in England share it otherwise. From Braceboro, the small brooch spire of St. Faith's is visible across the fields. This dates from 1715. There was an earlier church, but almost nothing survives in records about it, and no one is quite sure whether it stood on the same spot or somewhere else in the village. The only clue is a single box tomb to the south of this church. The church was restored in 1869, and the single bell, cast in 1907 by Llewellyns and James of Bristol, still hangs here today. Inside, the first thing that grabs your attention is the graffiti. The west wall is covered with it. Among it is something rarer, a witch mark. That's a protective symbol made of two interlocked V's for Virgin of Virgins. There's a small organ by the chancel arch, and a wall monument to the Curtis family, which includes Edward Curtis, who built this very church in 1715. But the real treasure is the 13th century knight's effigy in the sanctuary. He has a chainmail, a sword, a shield, and a dog at his feet. He's a survivor from the earlier church, and that raises a few questions about why nothing else was kept.
Beautiful church this, and I believe, is this the first one I've actually managed to get into on this run? I think it is. That's quite crazy, isn't it? I'm happy that it's this one though, because with it raining outside, it means I can stand out of the rain just for a few moments. But there you go, that's St. Faith's Church, and that is effectively Braceboro and Wilsthorpe. Now, to finish this episode off, I'm going to be driving through Wilsthorpe from basically its sort of end bit where the road goes to Braceboro, and down towards Wilsthorpe Mill to leave the place. There's not much point walking around this one, to be honest with you. It's just one straight road, and it's mainly all housing apart from this church. So I'm going to reverse the car back up to that junction, and we will do that to finish with. Lovely place. Old maps of Wilsthorpe mark some sort of mill here. It's known for sure that the River Glen once had a different course and passed through this area where we are now. That suggests there was a watermill here at one time. The maps would suggest there was a mill race running from the river to a wheel pit. By the early 20th century, the mill disappears from updated maps, which suggests it had already fallen out of use by then. However, could there have been a windmill here too? Well, one of the most interesting clues to a windmill's potential past is found in St Faith's Church. There's a very faded carving which appears to show a mill building with steps and 4 sails. The carving may simply be a villager's rough attempt to record it, but nobody knows if it actually existed. As we leave Braceboro and Wilsthorpe behind, you get a sense of just how much history is packed into these 2 small villages. The Spa, the Old Holt, the school turned village hall, and the Victorian Hall all sit within a mile of each other. M.R. James found enough atmosphere here to set Mr. Humphreys and his inheritance in a fictional Wilsthorpe that feels very close to the real one. Then there's the Old Holt on the M&GN line, sitting close to the Peterborough Corporation Waterworks with its deep wells and the pumping station. And as we roll out of the village, you can picture the mill that once stood here too, the one suggested by that faded carving on the church wall, with its steps and 4 sails scratched into the stone by someone who must have seen it with their own eyes. Now we've seen the place with ours.
By the maze where hedges twist tight, he studies old maps in fading light. He steps past the hall where shadows creep. He senses a pull that disturbs his sleep. Ooh, shapes in the dusk drift near. Something unseen draws near. Braceboro fields hold secrets long kept. Wilsthorpe earth stirs each time he slept. Old paths breathe cold through the maze's core. He steps inside and wants more and more. He studies the plan that the old man drew. He senses a clue in each hidden view. He hears dry leaves scrape across the ground. He knows that the maze guards something profound. Ooh, branches that curl like claws. Breath on the air that gnaws. Braceboro fields hold secrets long kept. Wilsthorpe earth stirs each time he slept. Old paths breathe cold through the maze's core. He steps inside and wants more and more. A shriek in the dark, a cry in the air, a scream that cuts through the trees laid bare. A shape by the hedge with a hollow stare, a chill that grips him and keeps him there. Cold claw, mist, fear, step, turn, gasp, near. Old secrets long kept. Wilsthorpe earth stirs each time he slept. Old paths breathe cold through the maze's core. He steps inside and wants more and more. Braceboro fields keep pulling him in. Wilsthorpe winds scrape over his skin. The maze waits still with its silent roar. He walks its path far and
Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.